I can't believe, right, that I'm having to talk about centrist podcasters talking about Zack Polanski again. It does seem to be the flavour of the month in terms of what political commentators want to talk about because he is popular. If you are a podcaster, if you are somebody who makes political content, you want to make content that is algorithmically optimized. And given that Zack Polanski, as someone who's charismatic and who has policies that speak to the electorate and who makes content that is engaging, talking about him is a way of riding the already optimized algorithm to try and get more eyeballs on your podcast, right? So last week we talked about the How to Win an Election podcast that belongs to the Times, which is full of centrist bores. Speaking of centrist bores, this is the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, which, to be fair, is a slightly more interesting and more smart name than just How to Win an Election, which is very dull. So we'll give them that. And at the very least, I think that having it hosted by Beth Rigby is slightly less nauseating than it being hosted by Hugo Rifkind or Matt fucking Chorley. Anyway, just another centrist podcast. This one's hosted by Sky News rather than The Times, probably why it's slightly less bad. But anyway, they're getting on the Polanski bashing bandwagon. They are just as rattled. And so you have here, as well as Beth Rigby, Harriet Harman, previous interim leader of the Labour Party between the resignation of Ed Miliband and the coronation of Jeremy Corbyn, and Ruth Davidson, who was previously the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party in Scotland, who is essentially to blame for Jeremy Corbyn not being Prime Minister. If Ruth Davidson hadn't have won all those seats in Scotland in 2017, the electoral maths, right, if those had gone to the SNP, would have favoured a Labour SNP coalition over a Conservative and Unionist with DUP coalition or confidence and supply arrangement. So you have Ruth Davidson to thank for Corbyn not being PM. By the way, they're discussing Zack Polanski, and some of the things they say, pretty weird. Let's have a watch.
Elections are a competition, and you do have to worry, and there's been a lot of focus on Zack Polanski as their new, supposedly dynamic, charismatic leader. Now, for me, the Greens have always seemed like a very sort of collaborative, women's focused, teamly kind of party. And Zack Polanski is not in that vibe at all. He's in the kind of big I am, male leader vibe.
The point is that he, a bit like Farage.
So this is some level of gender essentialism that I have never encountered before. Or on the one hand, you have like the feminine-coded teamly Green Party, and that's been removed and replaced with the masculine individual personality Green Party. Well, in reality, Zack is just an actual charismatic politician. Carla Denyer had some charisma. Adrian Ramsey clearly had none of that shit. But the idea that somehow the fact that we have more direct communications means that we've inherited a masculine energy is nonsense, right? Like, teamwork is not a gendered characteristic. And anyway, the idea that somehow Zack is making the Green Party's rise all about himself is also completely ridiculous. It's just not true. And one thing that you continue to hear from Zack in conversations with him is lots of people come up to him and say, I love what you're doing. I love what you've done to the Green Party. And Zack's response every single time, is, it's not about me. It's about all of us. It's about the collective effort. I may be the figurehead, right? But I'm here because my supporters elected me. I answer to my supporters. Our policies are set by members, Like, people getting mad about Zack over his nuclear stance. I'm like, well, he's not reflecting his own stance, even if that may be the case. He is bound to represent the interests of members who've passed that policy. The idea that somehow he's like a macho figure when he's like a member of the LGBT plus community and somebody who is representing a party that is totally democratic in nature makes literally no sense. Makes no sense at all. Just going off vibes rather than realising the democratic deliberative party structure is completely unchanged. I mean, this is what happens a lot when people talk about the Greens, where they'll try and make it so that Zack is the issue on a particular position. I'm like, well, no. Like, if you want to criticise the party, because they're the ones who've decided the positions that Zack is relaying to the public. That's his job as the leader of the party. It is not to direct where the party goes. It is to take direction from the membership and communicate it to the public, But yeah, this weirdo position that being part of a team is feminine coded and being an individual is masculine coded is very weird. Very, very weird to me.
To the right, he's capturing a bit of a zeitgeist. He's capturing disillusionment with the Labour Party. He's capturing young people's vibe, right? So Labour should be worried, right, Ruth?
What's so frustrating as well is that people talk about Zack in terms of vibes, right? Like, of course, he's a good communicator. He is communicating policy well. And the social media content he makes is good, right? But this isn't about vibes. This is about policy. This is exactly what they've done to Mamdani, where they'll talk about him in the abstract as if his charisma is the sole basis for his popularity. Well, his charisma is what is getting views, but it's the policy that is converting those views into support.
He's a really good communicator. He's capturing the idea for people that voted Labour, but maybe perhaps feel a bit disillusioned by them, that there is another option out there, that they can be true to their progressive lefty principles and they don't have to vote for the kind of chaos that is the Corbyn Your Party. There is something else. There's a place for them to go. They can go somewhere.
He's a combination. For me, it seems like he's a combination of Jeremy Corbyn and Nigel Farage, and neither appeals to me.
I mean, I can understand that comparison because, again, they are talking in a purely kind of vibes-based comparison here. And fundamentally, Zack mentions a lot how he doesn't take necessarily inspiration from Farage, but what he does do is understand that kind of communication, which is about telling a good story and using that to be able to communicate policy. Because if you don't have a good story and you're just talking facts and figures, people won't really buy into the things that you're saying. Whereas, of course, if you do tell a good story, that will get people involved in understanding why the policy is good for you.
I get that you're not getting the feels for Zack Polanski, Harriet, but I have to say, and I'm going to say this with respect, although I know it's going to sound disrespectful, I don't mean it to, so please don't shoot the messenger, but I don't think you're their target voter. I think they're looking much further down the age demographic, and they're looking at an electorate that isn't steeped in two-party politics anymore, that's far more transactional, that wants to use their ballot to make a particular point.
And the thing is, that's one thing I think that she's really got wrong here. Like, people aren't voting Green to make a point. This isn't a protest vote. We want the Green Party to get elected to pass policy, whether that be in coalition or in government, or in local government, or in devolved parliaments, right? We're not voting for the Greens to make a point. We're not sticking it to the Labour Party. We have joined a party on the basis of policy, and we're voting for the party on the basis of policy. Like, it's when people talk about the comparison between Zack Polanski and Nigel Farage being charismatic in comparison to Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. There was a point that Lewis Goodall made when talking about the Green Party's popularity in LBC. Let me bring it up.
Look, there's an old saying in politics, which is the medium is the message. And what that basically means is that the way the mediums that you have, whether that was initially print in newspapers and then television and now social media, that is the thing that crafts politics. It crafts not only how politics...
And we saw that for years in the papers here, didn't we?
Completely.
Yeah.
And so, you had politicians who were brilliant on television, like Ronald Reagan. In a sense, you wouldn't probably have had a Ronald Reagan without television.
Without telly. Yeah.
In the same way, you wouldn't have had Donald Trump without Twitter. The mediums of communication that we have shape the sort of politicians that we get. And Farage and Polanski are both made for the content era that we're living in. You know who isn't? Keir Starmer. Now, that might not be good. I'm not saying that's a great thing. That doesn't necessarily make for better...
really interesting
It doesn't make...
Again, what this is yet another invocation of the idea that people like Zoran Mamdani and Nigel Farage and Zack Polanski are only popular because they are good at making TikToks. And that the same formula can be replicated by centrist parties, no matter whether they are centre-left or centre-right or whatever it is, and they could achieve the same success. And that's just fundamentally not true. Getting a charismatic leader of the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or the Democratic Party or whoever it is, and then getting them to advocate for policies that don't actually deal with people's material problems in a way that Mamdani's and Polanski's do, and to a certain extent Nigel Farage as well. I think that the idea that they actually deal with the material problems is wrong, but people perceive them to be because he articulates his policy to the electorate. That is the fundamental difference here. Now, Polanski and Mamdani do incredibly well because of the charisma and because they are good at making short-form content and because they are understanding of social media virality, and they are the kind of politicians who are successful, as Lewis Goodall points out there, in the TikTok era of politics. But all of this would be for nothing if they didn't actually have some kind of prospectus for government, prospectus for policy, that they were trying to convince the public on, or that they were selling to the public, that they were giving to the public as a solution to their concerns. Because you're literally seeing it in the Democratic Party right now. There are people going, oh, I can win the Democratic Party primary by making high-quality portrait short-form video content, right? Like you saw it with Deja Fox in one of the Arizona primaries after Raul Grafaldo died, right? And Deja Fox hired proper film crews to provide a bunch of well-edited videos that had zero substance. And Raul Grijalva's daughter, Adelita Grijalva, who was backed by AOC and Bernie Sanders, and who has a very strong progressive policy platform on things like Medicare for All, she won the primary. She didn't need good TikToks to win it. It was about the policy. The policy, combined with social media virality and good communications and charisma, is what creates that kind of magic that we've seen from Mamdani, where he's changed the face of Democratic Party politics, and likewise with Zack Polanski, who's changed the success of the Green Party to polling heights they've never seen before, is because the policy is good and the communications are good. Labour are doing terribly because their communications are bad and their policy is bad, and likewise is true of the Conservatives. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.